Okay.
Good afternoon. Today's talk is the underdeveloped potential of municipal governance, and the presenter today is Carrel. Carrel has traveled extensively in Africa. He's a retired municipal sector administrator, and he's worked in the Yukon and Kootenays, among other places. He's a faithful reader of the Guardian newspaper, and he's here to present today. Welcome, Andre.
Thank you. Municipal government, the undeveloped potential of municipal government. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. The names are what and why and when, and how and where and who. Rudyard Kipling's Elephant Child does not refer to municipal governance, but I can think of no better introduction to the subject of this undeveloped potential. The question of what, why, when, how, where, and who are at the core of democratic governance. They are the bedrock of the citizen's right to contribute to the formulation of the laws. Questions per se are inconsequential without an obligation to provide answers. Accountability is the obligation to answer questions. Accountability is ultimately what distinguishes democracy from absolutism in its many forms. The separation of legislative from executive powers makes accountability possible by empowering one to ask questions and obliging the other to provide answers. Some democratic systems maintain a clean separation of the two powers. In the United States of America, for example, the separation is absolute. Executive powers rest with the president, legislative powers rest with Congress, and the two do not overlap. By contrast, under the British parliamentary system as we know it in Canada, the separation is at best symbolic. Contrary to common assertions, Canadians do not elect their federal and provincial governments. We elect parliamentarians and legislators. Americans elect a president, but we do not elect our prime ministers and premiers. You may recall that Christy Clark in British Columbia, and more recently Jim Prentice in Alberta, were sworn in as premiers, chief executive officers of their province, without first having been elected. Under the British parliamentary system, members of the executive need not be elected. Members of the executive who are elected as members of the legislative branch of government, not the executive branch. Accountability is weakened when members of the executive are simultaneously members of the legislative branch. It effectively leaves members of the executive accountable to themselves. The dual role of being both a legislator and a member of the executive under the British parliamentary system tends to place greater emphasis on party loyalty than that which is typically the case when the two powers are separated. The common practice under the British parliamentary system is to have the leader of the party who has been elected to a legislative majority serve as chief executive officer, an arrangement that demands unconditional party loyalty at the expense of government accountability. Canada's Constitution recognizes 2 orders of government, federal and provincial. Provincial legislatures have the exclusive power to make laws in relation to municipal institutions. Provincial legislatures have the constitutional authority, the freedom, the flexibility, and the power to legislate the what, the why, when, how, where, and who of local governance. In a narrow constitutional sense, elections notwithstanding, municipal councils are accountable to their creator, their provincial government more than they are to the citizens who elected them. Citizens are relegated to a secondary and supporting role in British Columbia municipal governance. That was made abundantly clear with the incorporation of the Jumbo Glacier Mountain Resort Municipality in November of 2012. This municipality has a mayor, 2 councillors. It has a council procedure bylaw, a council remuneration and expenses bylaw, a financial plan bylaw, and a zoning bylaw. It even has a freedom of information and protection of privacy bylaw, just as any other municipality would. Jumbo Glacier Mountain Resort is a regular municipality in all legal aspects. What sets it apart is it has 0 population, no people. The link connecting citizens and their municipal council in British Columbia runs through the provincial legislature. However, this is not to say that I must place a collect call to my MLA in Victoria if I have a question about a council decision. Municipal government does not distinguish legislative from executive functions. How is accountability achieved when one body holds both executive and legislative powers? I may question the mayor or a council member, or I may attend a council meeting to vent my frustration. Doing so may ease my frustration, but it does not amount to accountability. The duties and responsibilities of a British Columbia assigns to members of municipal council are, quote, to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality and its community, and, quote, to contribute to the development and evaluation of the policies and programs of the municipality respecting its services and other activities. Being responsible for the development of policies and programs, and also being responsible for their evaluation, suggests that councils are in effect accountable to themselves. The mayor has the duty and responsibilities of a councillor, and in addition serves as the municipality's chief executive officer. Chief executive officer responsibilities call on the mayor to, quote, provide leadership to the council, including by recommending bylaws, resolutions, and other measures that, in the mayor's opinion, may assist the peace, order, and good government of the municipality. Absent in all of this is any reference to citizens. The mayor's chief executive officer powers are not of the kind associated with a prime minister, a premier, or a corporate CEO. Executive decisions at the municipal level are council responsibilities. A council meeting agenda typically includes a mix of executive and legislative decisions. Council members rarely concern themselves about the nature of a resolution under consideration, whether the vote amounts to a legislative or an executive decision. Answering the elephant's child last question, the who question, is the citizen's responsibility. The election is the only process in municipal government which engages citizens at the initiation stage of a decision. As of this year, citizens will have the opportunity to answer that question just once every 4 years. The elephant child's first question, the what question, is arguably the most important question in municipal government. The responsibility for questions concerned with the what in government is of paramount importance in a democracy. Where do ideas about policies and programs to serve the well-being and interests of the municipality and its community come from? How do council members go about contributing to the development of policies and programs for their municipalities? What influences, sways, or induces the mayor's opinion and recommendations on the subject of bylaws, resolutions, and other measures that may assist the peace, order, and good government of the municipality? Citizens may on occasion approach their council individually or in groups with suggestions and recommendations about what council should be doing. And many ideas arise out of council debates. Provincial law allows citizens a limited role by subjecting some council decisions to citizen approval by way of a referendum or some other approval processes. Before finalizing certain land use decisions, councils are obliged to hold public hearings. It is important to keep in mind that in every instance where provincial law obliges municipal councils to engage citizens before finalizing the decision, that engagement occurs after council has dealt with what question and has initiated an action in accordance with the decision. Neither the Community Charter nor the Local Government Act provide a process by which citizens may initiate a measure, a policy, or a bylaw that they believe may contribute to the well-being or to serve the interests of their community. Freedom of speech permits citizens to make recommendations, but freedom of speech and the responsibility to act are not synonymous powers. The mayor alone has the legal responsibility to introduce ideas and make recommendations. The only responsibility councillors have is to consider such matters. To remove any doubt, the Community Charter specifies that the mayor's responsibility is to recommend measures that, in the mayor's opinion, not in consultation with council or the community, but in the mayor's opinion, may assist the peace, order, and good government of the municipality. Where does that leave accountability? How can citizens hold their elected councillors and mayor accountable for policies, programs, or other measures council has adopted on the mayor's recommendation in accordance with their respective legal responsibilities? The elephant child's why, when, how, and where questions are not insignificant. No municipality has within its organization the full range of resources needed to answer the why, when, how, and where questions related to municipal services and programs. A prudent and responsible council engages consultants to supply that information, the knowledge, and skills needed for effective and efficient service delivery and program maintenance. The City of Terrace spends from $200,000 to $265,000 per year, an average of roughly $250,000 per year, to secure consulting services in such fields as accounting, law, and engineering. The city does not consult lawyers, engineers, and accountants because city employees have no knowledge in these disciplines. Accountants are consulted to reassure citizens that the state of their municipality's finances as presented by staff is accurate. Lawyers and engineers are consulted in circumstances where mistakes could be costly. The money a municipality spends on legal, accounting, and engineering services is spent to ensure that council is well informed prior to answering why, when, how, and where questions related to services and programs. Questions and answers concerned with the why, when, how, and where on any matter are important, but they are of a secondary nature. There is little consolation in having done anything very well if at the outset what was done was the wrong thing. The City of Terrace has budgeted $12,000 for the 2014 election. As the Government of British Columbia has recently decided that municipal council shall serve 4-year terms, the annualized cost of municipal elections in Terrace is a paltry $3,000. 2 bits per capita per year. Citizens of Terrace could not buy a cup of coffee for what their municipality has budgeted for this year's municipal election. That is what we pay to give our local government the barest of democratic legitimacy. For every dollar spent on consultants to answer why, when, how, and where questions related to municipal services and programs, we spend a measly penny to decide who is to take responsibility for all the decisions made by and on behalf of our municipal corporation. If that number comes as a surprise, consider the fact that we spent nothing at all to enable the community to guide our council on the most important questions of them all. The what questions. What do we need? What do we want? What are our priorities? We, the citizens of this community, are the people who have to live with the consequences of decisions made by city in council chambers. We are the people who, one way or the other, directly or indirectly, pay for it all. It will be the responsibility of the people we will elect in a few days to make the right decisions, hopefully, on any matter that may arise in the 4 years to come. Neither we, who will do the voting, nor the candidates who hope to be elected, know what the future will bring and what issues, problems, or opportunities the community will face in the 4 years to come. Is this blank check arrangement in our governance truly the most we can expect from a democratic system? Would a process that empowers citizens to initiate questions for the community to answer on any matter of the citizen's choice be in conflict with democratic principles? Would council be insulted or offended? Or would its duties and responsibilities be marginalized if citizens had access to a process by which they could place a community need, want, or priority on council's agenda? Before we examine the question, let us briefly examine how our neighboring jurisdictions, Alberta, Northwest Territories, and Yukon, deal with engaging citizens at the municipal level. Albertans may petition their municipal council for bylaws, resolutions, or any matter within the council's jurisdiction. When Albertans petition for a vote on a bylaw, they have the final word. The result of the vote is binding. Alberta municipal councils may also submit any questions on any matter within their jurisdiction to a vote by the electors. But votes of this kind are not binding on council. Northwest Territories citizens have the power to petition their council to initiate a new bylaw or to not proceed further with a bylaw which has already received first reading. When a Northwest Territories council receives such a petition, it is required, quote, to cause a bylaw conforming to the subject matter and intent of the petition to be prepared, and to submit the bylaw to the voters for approval. Yukon's Municipal Act provides for both plebiscites and referendums. Yukoners may petition their council for a referendum to initiate a new bylaw or resolution, to amend an existing bylaw or resolution, or on any matter within the council's jurisdiction, including capital projects. While the results of referendum votes are binding, the results of plebiscites are not. And the Canadian Law Dictionary defines plebiscites as the means of securing an expression of popular view from the common people on particular issues, usually by a yes/no response. The referendum is defined as a vehicle to permit voters to participate directly in lawmaking. British Columbians do not have access to a comparative democratic tool. The community charter allows councils to, quote, seek community opinion on a question that the council believes affects the municipality by voting or any other process the council considers appropriate. The results of whatever process the council may consider to be appropriate are not binding on council. What is significant is that only councils, not citizens, have the authority to initiate such a process. It is the most glaring aspect of British Columbia's undeveloped potential of municipal governance. British Columbia does not provide citizens with a legitimate process by which they may, on their own initiative, direct their municipal council to address a matter of concern to the community, as do citizens in our neighboring jurisdictions. The only democratic tool available to citizens in British Columbia municipalities is the election of a council with legislative and executive powers, and to do so on terms and conditions as determined by the provincial government. There is, however, an opportunity for councils to enrich local democracy. Council's authority to, quote, seek community opinion by voting or any other process gives council the flexibility to expand their citizens' meager democratic role. Council could use that authority to establish a process to enable citizens to participate and to be engaged in their own governance. Council could develop a program, a community voice program, to empower citizens to initiate a dialogue within their community for the purpose of giving direction to their council on matters of concern to the community. A bylaw establishing such a community voice program would empower citizens to ask questions to be answered by the community in a plebiscite without conflicting with the Community Charter or the Local Government Act. A community voice program would have to be based on clear principles and would have to establish precise guidelines. An important principle would be that questions put to a vote must be free of ambiguity and be easily answered with yes or no. A good example is the 2005 terrace fluoridation referendum question. Do you want the city of Terrace to continue adding fluoride to its water supply? Yes or no? The 1995 Quebec independence referendum question, on the other hand, is an example of the kind of questions the community voice program should not permit. And that was, do you agree that Quebec should become sovereign after having made a formal offer to Canada for a new economic and political partnership within the scope of the bill of respect, with the bill respecting the future of Quebec and of the agreement signed on June 12, 1995. A question like that should not go in the community voice program. Another principle should require petitioners to submit a statement, 500 words, about the question's background, objective, and rationale. Council, in turn, should be required to respond to the petition with a 500-word statement of its own to establish its position on the question. It is crucial to the process that Council articulate its position to the petition, whether in support or in opposition. The juxtaposition of the petitioners' and Council statements gives citizens a balanced understanding of the issues related to the question. A citizen's yes or no decision made after having considered the petitioners and the Council statements on the ballot question would be an informed decision. It is possible that Council could agree with the petition's intent, but prefer an alternate approach to its solution. In such circumstances, the plebiscite ballot would need to ask a primary and a secondary question. Do you agree with the petition question, yes or no? Number two, if the majority agrees, which position do you support, the petitioners or Council's? Let me give you a hypothetical example of a two-stage plebiscite question. A group of citizens submits a petition to install bicycle lanes on the 4-lane city streets. The proposed question is, are you in favor of installing bicycle lanes on street X? In their 500-word statement, the petitioners propose to limit parking to one side of the street to free up the space needed to install 2 bicycle lanes. The city supports the bicycle lane idea, but in its responding statement, proposes to reduce Street X to 2 traffic lanes with a center turn lane using the space taken up by the 4th traffic lane for the bicycle lanes. The primary question would thus be, are you in favor of installing bicycle lanes on Street X? Yes or no? The secondary question would be, if yes, which alternative do you prefer? Reduced parking, center turn lane? If the first question is approved, supporters will get the bicycle lanes. How the project proceeds may be of secondary importance to bicycle advocates. The secondary question is of significance to those who oppose the project. It gives them the opportunity to back what, in their view, may be the less objectionable solution should the majority vote in favor of bicycle lanes.
Take it just a quick step backwards, just one step. You're actually just out of the frame.
A what?
Would you take one step backwards? You're just out of the frame,
Oh.
the video frame.
Okay,
If that works for you, I think.
that works for me.
Apologies for the interruption right there. Thank you.
Carry on?
Yeah, we're golden.
Okay. It would be a mistake to presume the outcome of a vote, even when council supports the petition. A petition may be promoted by a special interest, that could be social, cultural, economic, or environmental. And council may agree with the petitioner's objective. It is conceivable, however, that the community as a whole may disagree. The plebiscite vote would confirm the true will of the community. When petitioners and council disagree, or when their respective petitions call for a 2-stage ballot question, the consequences of the vote will depend as much on the strength of the arguments presented by the parties as it does on voter turnout. The moment of truth is when the ballots are counted. A plebiscite result cannot be binding on council, but council will have to react to it. Council's response could be influenced by many factors. Was the voter turnout significant, or was it marginal? Was the decision solid, or was it a squeaker? Was the plebiscite concerned with a municipal or an extra-municipal matter? Many issues under provincial and federal jurisdiction are of interest and concern to people living in the community. An issue concerned with public health, education, and energy may be under provincial or federal jurisdiction, or both, but that does not diminish the community's determination and its legitimate right to be heard. It is appropriate in a democratic society for a municipal council to raise any matter of concern to the community with any government, particularly so when council is acting in response to a plebiscite initiated by the community itself. There may be confusion or uncertainty in the community about the jurisdiction regarding some matters. For example, a rail overpass. Is it a federal matter because it deals with railways? Is it a provincial matter because it deals with highways? Is it a private matter because the railway is a public company? Or is it a municipal matter because the desired overpass would be located in the municipality? When a subject of a petition falls under 2 or more jurisdictions, council's statement in response to the petition could shed a light on the question of jurisdiction. It could inform voters and thereby lend credibility to the results of the vote. We must remember that there is no certainty about the consequences of a plebiscite on a matter that is entirely within council's jurisdiction. It would be clear sailing if the vote were to endorse a council position. Council would be placed in a far more difficult position if the community were to reject one of its pet projects. The outcome of a plebiscite vote under Community Voice program, although not binding on council, would have greater legitimacy than do opinion polls or ad hoc petitions. Even if a council were to experience only 1 or 2 plebiscites during a 4-year term, The experience would make council more accountable. How council members individually and jointly respond to the voice of the community could well become an issue in the next municipal election. A community voice program would need administrative rules. Careful thought would have to be given to the number of signatures required to qualify a petition for plebiscite. The number of signatures required to validate a petition varies significantly among neighboring jurisdictions. Northwest Territories requires a minimum of 25% of the municipality's voters. Alberta's minimum is 10% of the population. I prefer the Yukon's approach, which leaves it up to each municipal council to determine the sufficiency of petitions. Voter turnout in Terrace municipal elections is rather weak. Roughly 2,000 votes, or 25%, in the last 3 general elections. I fear that the validation requirements for initiatives in Alberta and Northwest Territories may be initially unattainable in Terrace, based on our election participation record. The number of signatures required should be high enough to discourage abuse of the program, but it must be low enough to be attainable. Based on historic voter participation, 500 would be a reasonable number of signatures required to validate a petition at the introduction stage of a community voice program in Terrace. A petition for plebiscite should have to be registered at City Hall before proponents set out to collect signatures. An application for registration should include the ballot question and the supporting 500-word explanatory statement. The city should be allowed 2 weeks to review the material to verify that it complies with the program's guidelines. The administration's review should ensure that the ballot question conforms to the rules concerning the question's clarity, and that the explanatory statement is free of libel and personal attacks. If rejected by the administration, the petitioner should have the option of abandoning the petition, revising the material, or appealing the administration's decision to council. Council should be allowed 30 days to hear and consider the appeal. Council's decision on the appeal should be final. After the city's approval of the material, the petitioner should be allowed a maximum of 60 days to collect the signatures required to validate the petition. It would be prudent for petitioners to collect more than the required minimum, allowing for the possibility of some signatures being invalid. The city should then be allowed 30 days to verify the validity of the signatures. Once the city has confirmed that a petition meets all the requirements set out in the bylaw, it should certify the petition for plebiscite. A petition certificate should set out the date for the vote, and voting day should follow the plebiscite certification by not less than 60 days and not more than 120 days. At this stage, the petition will no longer be the petitioner's private matter. It would have attained the status of an official municipal program. Finally, not later than 30 days prior to voting day, the city should have to publish the plebiscite question along with the petitioner's and the council's 500-word statements on the city's webpage and in the local newspaper. 2 or more simultaneous petitions may be unlikely, but the possibility cannot be dismissed. Multiple ballots in elections and referendums held simultaneously with elections are not uncommon and do not present a problem. The number of plebiscites to be voted on at one time need not be restricted. If more than one plebiscite is pending, and if the program's time limits permit it, one voting day could be designated for multiple plebiscites. The means to finance a community voice program should also be addressed in the bylaw. A responsible way to deal with the financing requirement would be to establish a reserve fund for the program. An initial contribution of $25,000, 1 cup of coffee per capita, to a community voice program reserve should be adequate to finance the program and to maintain budget stability. all costs related to a plebiscite should be paid out of the reserve fund. The fund's balance should be restored with an appropriate budget allocation in the year following. It would be important to ensure that the Community Voice program could not be dismissed as a council-sponsored public relations gimmick. The program should be adopted so as to ensure that the process deserves to be recognized and respected as the legitimate voice of the community. To that end, the program's implementation bylaw, on having received third reading, should be submitted to a plebiscite prior to being considered by council for final adoption. Citizen consent should have to meet two criteria. A, the program bylaw must have the support of a simple majority, and B, voter participation must be greater than voter participation in the preceding municipal election. The second criterion is essential to the program's democratic legitimacy. There must be no doubt that citizens are prepared to make an effort and to assume greater responsibility for their own governance. Terrace does not need a community voice program if citizens are content to leave the responsibility for governance in the hands of the elected council. The city should advertise Community Voice program by law plebiscite along with an outline of its purpose and objectives on its webpage and in the local newspaper. That statement should make it clear that the community, not the council, is responsible for the fate of the program. It should be left to the community organizations, to clubs, societies, and to individuals who see a value in the program to ensure maximum voter participation. Those who consider the idea to be of little value need only suggest that citizens stay away and not bother to vote at all. The program's philosophy is to engage the community. It is not to cater to an activist elite. If the level of voter participation in the plebiscite does not exceed the voter turnout of the preceding election, council would be fully justified in abandoning the idea of a community voice program, even if a majority had voted in support of it. If that were to be the case, I would offer my apologies to council for having wasted their time and the municipality's resources. If adopted, a community voice program would likely take several years to become an integral part of the community and its political culture. Formulating a question, writing a compelling 500-word statement in support of it, and collecting signatures from qualified voters is hard work. Over time, and with experience, people will be aware that signing a petition leads to consequences. With experience, citizens would likely reflect on a petition's topic with care before endorsing it. The nucleus of democracy's philosophy is one of citizens being engaged in taking responsibility for the governing of their own communities. To engage people as political actors, not merely spectators and critics, is the Community Voice program idea's objective. To respect people as citizens, not merely taxpayers, goes to the heart of the Community Voice program idea. If a program of the kind were to be allowed to evolve and mature over time, the democratic experience gained would be its own reward. I open this presentation with a few lines from Rudyard Kipling's Elephant Child. Let me now conclude with a passage drawn from Francis Gummer's Democracy and Poetry. Rousseau's idea of individual freedom and sovereignty of the people are suspect in politics and are quite condemned in science and the arts. It can be shown very clearly that the central constructive idea has never been properly tested in politics and has been rejected in the wider field on weak and perverted evidence. Let us look at this matter a little more closely. He wrote that in 1911. Thank you.
All
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Excellent.
I'll try and keep that dry on my way out.
And I will start